A Shalom Akim Shabbat Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Most for teaching us this truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwath that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. Back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to go through just a short story, in regards to an account that is found in the book of Genesis with our forefather Lot, and essentially the perks, the benefits of having wisdom. Essentially wisdom, being, as the scriptures describe, the principal thing, because that's one of the things that our people strongly lack, is essentially wisdom, and they're realizing that how much of our people have been destroyed because of lack of wisdom. And essentially wisdom, first and foremost starting with the fear of the Lord, right? And how much not only did the wisdom was a useful benefit to our forefather Lot in this situation, but at the same time it was to essentially to preserve him from the perils. Just like in this society, how you have a lot of sexual immorality that occurs within the walls and the confines of this society, but this society is supposed to be a so-called God-fearing nation, right? So you're seeing that essentially as the scriptures describe, this would be spiritually Sodom and Egypt, right? Because the ways of Sodom and Egypt are essentially present within the society as a whole, and the ways of the Lord are completely removed and xed out, crucified, right? So that it's not actually something that is practiced here, right? So I wanted to read through this story, and because the mindset is pretty much the same. It is this, see, as I'll read it, I'll make my commentary in regards to Lot's haste, trying to depart, and the Lord, preserving him from that destruction that fell upon, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And just like the sentiment is really the same. We hope and pray that the Lord, preserves us, from, the destruction, through those ICBM, missiles that's going to completely, turn America into a fire, a lake of fire, right? And, the mindset really is pretty much, the same, right? Essentially to seek righteousness. As a matter of fact, I'll start there. And, oh, Salak, it's Zephaniah, I'm sorry. That's Zephaniah. Let me see. This is Zephaniah 2 verse 3, and it says, "Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be hid. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger." Right. So we want to be hid, within, preserved essentially, from the Lord's anger, right? Because the ways of this place, as the scriptures state, it just brings forth death. The wages of sin is death, right? So, I wanted to read through this, like I said, and go into it. And Lord's will, this lesson would just be edifying, right? So, Wisdom of Solomon, the 10th chapter, just gives us, the various different accounts of, the wisdom essentially preserving examples of different men that attended upon wisdom, attended upon her, right? Like I said before, our people, this is one thing that they strongly lack, right? So this is Wisdom of Solomon chapter 10 verse 6 here, and it says, "And when the ungodly perished, she delivered a righteous man who fled from the fire which fell upon the 5 cities, of whose wickedness even unto to this day the wasteland that smoketh is a testimony, and plants bearing fruit that will never come to ripeness, and a standing pillar of salt is a monument of an unbelieving soul. For regarding not wisdom, they got only this hurt, that they knew not the things which were good, but also left behind them to the world a memorial of their foolishness, so that in the things wherein they were offended, they could not so much as be hid. So they weren't essentially hid, from the Lord's anger, right? So when you go into, as a matter of fact, I'll read the story and I'll go into it a little bit more in detail of what actually, happened, right? So let me get this here. Hold on. Let's see here. This is Genesis chapter 19, verse 1 here, and it says, "And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot seen them, and rose up to meet them. And he bowed his face towards the ground, and he said, Behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, that ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. Before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they said unto Lot, and they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men that which came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Right? So, essentially, Lot is expressing his essentially his hospitality towards these men, right? And then these other men came, and they wanted to do some wicked behaviors towards these men, right? So here it is. It just is an example to show the kind of lewd and filthy behavior that was going on during this time, right? Just like how you have within this time, you have a lot of lewd and filthy behavior that goes on within America, right? And this is one of the reasons a lot of nations don't like America, is because they push that lewd, filthy vibration upon other countries, and other countries don't want that vibration. And it comes out in very, very subtle ways, right? It comes out a lot in it comes, I don't want to say first, but it comes out, one primary way is in their music, within their movies, within their cartoons. That's why when you read about Babylon in Jeremiah the 51st chapter, it describes the other nations have drunken of her wine, and therefore the nations are mad, right? Because they've taken on a lot of those different philosophies, and they realize that these ways are nothing but bring forth sin and death, right? So they don't want those so-called Americanized ways, within their own culture, especially in the Middle East, the so-called Middle East, right? They don't want those lewd practices being done, within their own nation, because they realize it makes their men a lot weaker. It doesn't promote family. It turns their children, into, alphabet people, right? So it's a lot of lewdness that comes out, within America as a whole, right? So, but this is Lot's response, to these men here. And it says, Behold, now I have two daughters, Genesis 19:8. I have two daughters, which I have not known a man, and let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, that ye may do to them as you good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof, right? So essentially, Lot was he's offering his 2 daughters, which was even, it was more righteous, right? They have not known a man, right? So that, if back in the ancient times, it wasn't kind of like, now, a man would actually, if he had daughters, you would essentially, you would want her to have essentially a man of understanding, right? But things were a lot different back then, right? But here in the back of these other men's mind, they were burning, it was an unclean, inordinate affection that they had for other men, right? So here it says, verse 10 here, and it says, but the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut to the door. And they smote the men that were at the door at the house with blindness, both small and great, for they wearied themselves to find the door. And it says, verse 12, and the men said unto Lot, hast thou here any besides son-in-law and sons and thy daughters? Whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out to this place. So essentially, do you have anybody else, any family or anything like that, bring them out here. For essentially, because he was getting the understanding that the Lord was about to actually bring forth a fiery judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And it says, for verse 13, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it, right? So just like how there was a particular judgment that was going to fall upon ancient Sodom and Gomorrah, there's a particular judgment that is slated to fall upon Babylon the Great, that's slated to fall upon America, right? And it's written, right? So essentially what you have now is a lot of these different nations are being stirred up to in that warlike mindset to bring that judgment upon America as well. And as sooner thereafter, you're going to see more of that rift between America and the EU nations, where they're going to actually become more like enemies rather than stay as friends, right? So they're going to actually burn that whore, which is America, with fire, right? Pursuant to Revelation 17, right? So let me go back to the story here. So this is Genesis 19 and 15. I want to read down to verse, I think, 24. And it says here, and when the morning arose, then the angels hasted Lot, saying, arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed with the iniquity of this city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, and the Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth to set him without the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, he said, escape with thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. Right? So essentially Lot has to escape for his life, right? So just like how you have in this time, we're essentially departing from the ways, departing from these different filthy practices, that a lot of us were caught up in, the idol worship and so on and so forth. That's why Paul said, you were Gentiles, carried away after these dumb idols as you were led, right? Because all those different ways did not promote life. It just made essentially it was a displeasing sight in the eyes of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bashem El Shai, right? So what I'm going to do here, this is verse 19. This is verse 18, and it says, and Lot said unto them, not so, my Lord. Behold, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life, I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. Behold, now this city is near to flee, as it is a little one. O let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? My soul shall live. And he said unto them, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing, that I will not overthrow this city, for which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, come thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. And the sun was risen above the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. And here's the judgment that fell upon it, right? So this is verse 24. And then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. But here's the kicker, just to go back to that last verse I read earlier. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt, right? So this is the you saw the difference between the Lot's wife and Lot, right? So she looked back, right? And she became a pillar of salt, right? So she got caught up within the judgment, right? But you see how essentially there was a certain level of hastiness within Lot's behavior when he heard about the judgment, because earlier within this same chapter there were family members that he told, and they thought, when you read it in the NLT, it says that they were joking. They thought Lot was joking because they didn't understand and didn't believe in the judgment that was upon them, right? Just like when you tell for brothers that have like family and so on and so forth, right? You tell them about certain things that are happening. They think of you. They think they can't rationalize the judgment that's going to fall upon America, because they think they also think that America is just going to constantly continue, right? But the scriptures talk about, in their affliction they shall seek me early, right? So and they will know also in the back of their mind, as the scriptures also say, that they would know that a prophet was among them, right? So Jake, when our people have a lot of comforts readily available to them, they don't actually think, as it says in Ezra, they have loathed their my law while they had liberty, right? So liberty basically explains a sentiment of freedom. So just because they have a bit of freedom, they think that they don't actually consider what is actually being spoken to them, right? So just like how Lot was explaining certain things towards those certain family members there, they didn't actually believe him. They thought he was joking, right? Until that actual judgment fell upon them and they got caught up in it. But the Lord delivered Lot out of that. So that's why it's so important. That's why wisdom really is so important. I kind of wanted to express this, to understand and show the value of wisdom, right? Because wisdom is really a tool of preservation. That one of the things that our people strongly lack is that, right? So let me get this here. This is Proverbs chapter 4, verse 5 here, and I'll read down to 9. And it says, Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee, right? So a lot of people don't, they don't like wisdom because it is essentially seen as a burden. It's not seen as profitable. But in this situation, you see that how much wisdom really was profitable to Lot, because and this is why the accounts are so important, because it shows you the priceless value of wisdom, because while a lot of our people, They strongly prioritize, chasing, money. Money is not going to do you very little good. As the scriptures say that our riches don't profit, within a day of wrath, but righteousness can deliver from death, right? So it says here, verse 7, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all that getting, get understanding. And wisdom is really is a fear of the Lord, and that's one of the things that a lot of our people don't actually exemplify, is that, and it shows in their behavior, right? So they essentially, being around these different other nations, our people have become degenerates, just like, and even further worse than them, right? So it says here, exalt her, verse 8, exalt her, and she shall promote thee, and she shall bring thee to honor when thou dost embrace her, and she shall give to thine head an ornament of grace and a crown of glory, and she shall deliver thee, right? So that's really the importance of one of the things that we're as a people that we strongly lack is really wisdom, because we don't look as decked out as we should, but only a very few would actually prioritize, a very small remnant would actually prioritize and understand the value of wisdom, right? So I kind of just wanted to read that real quick, just to show the value, the benefits of wisdom, because the scriptures also describe how wisdom, she prevented them and that desire her, right? And that desire, is to desire wisdom, so on and so forth, is a preservation tool from all these different, I'm really speaking about the grandiose judgment that's going to fall upon America, but also it can also preserve you from very, very little things as well, right? Actually just caring for wisdom, because people don't understand that if they had wisdom, they would be prevented from these different situations sometimes, right? So anyways, I just thought I would just read that story real quick, right, to show and describe as a matter of fact, I didn't get that, but let me get that. I'll end off that last one, because this is really the judgment that's will fall upon America. This is let's grab this here. This is Isaiah chapter 13, verse 19. And it says here, in Babylon, the glory of kingdoms and the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency shall be as when the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So this is referring to America and its judgment that's going to fall upon, this new Babylon, right? This new Babylon, right? That essentially is known as the mother of all harlots, because she also encapsulates all the different kingdoms that came before, has all those different gods and the sexual morality, the different perverse practices that occur within this society, right? So this is the judgment that's going to fall upon her, right? So anyways, that's pretty much it. But Lord's will, this lesson was just quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.